market in Fethard
Yeah.
in 1947.
Yeah, in the same place as it is today.
And it's still there.
Yeah.
Right. And are they doing a good job, Hannie?
Well, I wasn't here now for a year. I'm knocked up for a year. And I think they're going all right, you know.
And it's still a weekly market.
Oh, it is, yes.
It
every
runs
Friday.
It runs
Friday.
every week.
Yeah, every Friday.
Yeah, that's super. That's super. And did you get much help when you were starting it up?
Great cooperation. The people were great. The only thing, some of the shopkeepers objected.
Yes.
And then Mrs. Hughes wrote out a notice to say that we weren't underselling any of the shopkeepers. We were charging the same prices, and that we weren't doing them any harm. So they got over it anyhow.
Absolutely. And then when did the second one and the third one start? When everyone started talking about what you were doing in Fethard?
Well, I don't know. Care started shortly after. Well,
right.
not very soon afterwards, I suppose. But they were all up around the country. They were in Tullamore and all those places. I don't know if they're still there. They're still in Care.
Yeah.
There's a lot of branches now.
It still has the same values, hasn't it? Yeah. Yes. And when you were starting, what made it different? What were the values that you loved to see?
Oh, well, of course, at that time things were very cheap.
Yeah.
Very cheap. Now, a head of cabbage at that time was only 4p.
Yes.
And now look at the price of it.
If you were to change anything, would you change anything at all, looking back on it?
I wouldn't. I don't think so.
Mm.
You know, I'd love to see a lot of young women coming in.
Yeah. So, what were the big sellers in the market, Hannie? What was there always a run on? Was it the cakes? Was it the flowers? Was it the vegetables? What was it?
Eggs, principally. And Mrs. Hughes said, no matter how many eggs people had, they hadn't to bring them home.
Right.
They sent them to Dublin, then up to Finlayter's.
Yeah.
And they sent them to the country shop.
Yeah.
And the boxes are still inside that they packed them in.
Yeah.
30 dozen.
Yeah.
And Mrs. Hughes would take them to the railway.
And they'd go up on the train.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there'd be nothing going home. They were all sold off.
Home, everything was sold.
Yeah.
And then other things like, well, confectionery mostly all sold. Cut flowers all sold. But if there was things left now, smaller things, people would have to take them home.
Of course.
Yeah.
But there wasn't much taken home.
No, very little.
Yeah. And it was just the one day the market was on, or was it 2 days, or how many days a week?
One day.
Just the one day.
1 day.
That was it.
3 hours.
3 hours?
Yes.
And that was on what day of the week was that?
Friday, from 8 o'clock until 11.
8 o'clock till 11 on a Friday.
The reason they had it at 8 o'clock was some of the people that were going to work could come before they go to work.
Right.
And some of the shopkeepers were great now and supported it from the very beginning, and they came in before they started business.
Right.
So
nice.
It was great.
Yeah. And by 11 o'clock everything was nearly gone.
Yes,
was
the
gone.
door was closed.
That's gone. You were home for lunch and away you went.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was great. Great. And it's still in the same location today, is it?
Oh, it is, yeah.
And where it's in the hall.
Town hall.
In the town hall in Fethard.
Yes, yeah.
Nice.
And that's now going to be big repair on it. So we'll be still left there, I think.
So that's nearly 52 weeks of the year.
Yeah.
For 67 nearly years.
We usually had a week off at Christmas. The week after, we'd have a big market for Christmas, and then the following week wouldn't have any market.
That's right.
Yeah, Christy would bring in loads of holly.
Yeah.
And he'd be on the street with it, and he's frozen.
No.
But he'd be selling away.
You want the holly. And did they do wreaths and everything for the graves at Christmas and everything? Yeah. So throughout the year, there'd be all sorts being sold. You'd have your eggs and your vegetables and your flowers and your cakes.
And crafts. Now, crafts is a very small thing. It used to be only, I was doing it myself, gloves and mittens and caps and tea cosies just for the winter, and then we'd take them home for the summer, you know.
Yes, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And
we never got into selling crafts in a big way.
Yeah. Was there ever, did the market never take place because of weather, or were you ever snowed in and couldn't make it? And
we're coming out one day and we were in the van with Mrs. Hughes, and the ice was on the road and the van
skidded all over the place. Yeah. Didn't break any eggs, I hope.
No. We had no eggs coming home.
But and can you remember the best day at the market and the worst day at the market? Can you remember them?
I have the figures now somewhere. The first day at the market it was, I don't know, it was something about £6, I think.
Good.
Yeah, and well, I don't know the best days now. Of course, now there's.
Well, the best days was when everyone went.
Yeah.
And they didn't bring anything home.
No.
Yeah. And how many people would you have at the market selling?
Well, in those days we had a lot of people selling. There was people in charge of the eggs, and there was people in charge of the vegetables, and there was people there was a lot of people. But now they're very, very scarce now.
Yeah. The younger generation coming on, you know, it's hard to get them involved in the markets.
They're not interested now.
Yeah.
No.
Because I suppose they were brought up with supermarkets.
Yeah, that's it. And they came through a very good period, you know.
That's right.
Yeah, and they wouldn't be bothered with small things like the market.
They probably wouldn't know where half the stuff comes from.
Yeah, they wouldn't, I
No,
suppose.
eggs come in a box and they don't know anymore after that.
No.
You know?
I remember one day my mother, God rest her, she had the eggs ready and she had them hanging up, and I went to pull a towel and knocked the bag of eggs. I can always remember that.
And over they went.
Yeah.
I'd say there was no cake for you that night. So there was a bit of work in it.
Oh, there was. I did it for 31 years.
Go away.
And I was secretary and treasurer, but then it was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and they wanted a secretary, and they wanted a treasurer, and they wanted all different things. So.
Well, I hear now you're a great letter writer.
I like writing. Now I'm not as good to write as I was. I'm very bad to write. But I still write letters.
And who would you write to?
Well, I write to my cousins. I have a few nuns, and I write to them. And my granddaughter's mother-in-law, write to her. And I write to people in nursing homes and that kind of thing.
That's fantastic. That's super. And I hear you've met a couple of presidents.
Yeah.
Mary Robinson came to Fethard.
She did. And we presented her with a belt made by one of our members. He was a Church of Ireland man, but he went to Donegal from there. So he was a loss to the market.
So it's spread all over the country, Hannie.
Yes, yeah.
What you started here in Fethard has gone throughout the country.
It has, yeah.
And I hear you travelled up to Dublin for a cup of tea with Mary McAleese.
We did. It was very nice, actually. Very, very nice.
And was there many at that?
There was a big crowd.
Yeah. But Mary Robinson came to visit the market.
Oh, she did. And there was a monument up in memory of Mrs. Hughes, and she unveiled it.
Have you visited any of the other markets at all? Have you ever looked at any of the travelled to any?
Well, I was in Cahir Market, I was in Dungarvan Market, I was down in Wexford, Kilkenny, different places. We used to go to the quarterly meetings, you know, and we used to go. So they were all good.
You used to go to the plough matches, didn't you?
We used to go to plough matches in the early years, you know. Went down to Wellington Bridge in Wexford, and went to Rockwell and all different places.
Yeah, because it moves every year. Yeah, the ploughing. And would you have a market at the ploughing?
Oh, we would.
Yeah.
And our wallflowers, they'd be a great sale for them. And we used to bring piles of them tied in dozens. And we did teas in Rockwell, and we had to get bread in Rose Green on our way home to make sandwiches for the next day, you know.
Yeah.
This is great.
And would they travel far to the markets?
Oh, they would. There was members from Rose Green and from My Glass and from Clooneen and all the different. Now they all kind of died off, you know. When the older people went, they went.
And how are you with the figures? Are you good with numbers?
No, I wasn't. One of the men in the bank took me in for a few evenings to help me to.
Yeah.
You know,
And how often would you head up to Dublin then?
Well, I used to go to Dublin every year for a few days,
Right.
and then I'd go up to the annual meeting.
Yeah.
And I made great friends too in Dublin.
What was the most unusual thing you'd sell?
Well, Well, we used to sell, Phyllis, or Helen O'Connell had rabbits, and Mrs. Daisy Gowrie used to bring her in oats from, she used to sell those.
And of course, they'll be making fresh bread with the oats and
yeah.
And honey as well. The honey.
What?
You sell the honey too, don't you?
Oh yeah, we sell honey.
So
honey sells well all the time.
Would you have many people keeping bees?
Well, there's a man up the road now that supplies the market. Now, I wouldn't know anything about other people, but he has honey all the year round.
Yeah. But the big sellers was the eggs and the bakes.
The eggs now, the eggs that brought the market together really.
Yeah.
But then people started bringing other things, roots of flowers and all sorts of things, and it built up from there.